Hello, Shoyan here. The insulation is in, so I won't say it's warm yet, but at least the wind isn't blowing through anymore. Today, I'm installing the kamoi, shiki, and window jamb extensions. I'll work on the shiki between the rooms, then the floor, and then the rest of the kamoi and shiki.
これはちょっと真ん中で潜っとったやな。気持ちな。まあまあ。これが5、6。で、ここでちょっとちゃうんや。7、3なんやっけ。3ミリ違うだね。ここ全然悪ない。ここも悪ない。ただこれがちょっと一部下がってこれが正解なんやろな。きっと。73やねえか ?73。
This time, I'm working on the section between the new addition and the original 6 tatami mat room. There used to be a 2-meter oshiire and a 1-meter tokonoma here. I'm going to frame the floor and install the subfloor in this section. The floor for the 6 tatami mat room will remain as is. So as long as the height isn't way off, I'll set the shiki at pretty much the existing height. There was talk of laying tatami on this 1.5 tatami mat section. But since the homeowner wanted to put a gas heater and a TV here, a wood floor seemed like the better choice, and we decided to go with flooring. It becomes hinoki cypress flooring from the inside of the column. I run a shiki where the two rooms meet, and that gives the clean break. This house runs on a meter grid. So 3 grids means 3 meters, and this shiki is also 3 meters. These products come pre-cut at 4 meters or 3 meters, so that's cutting it pretty close. Makes me a little nervous. There's a dado on the column that was used for the old shiki. I'm going to use that on one side and cut a new dado on the opposite side to install. You actually don't need to cut a dado in a case like this. You can just set the height and screw it down. But since the dado is already there, I'm going to use it for the new shiki.
Oh!
するの？
無理ないよ。
The dado will be plugged, so I'm using the same hinoki cypress to make the plug. It's ideal to use the heartwood portion. A 3-meter shiki is the easiest length to set in place. Anything longer is heavy, and anything shorter needs too much of an angle to fit. A 3-meter piece is the easiest to work with. I cut a tongue on one side and a dado on the other, then drive in a plug. That's the traditional way to install a shiki. I'm installing the 1 meter shiki on the opposite side of the room the same way, but this one I'll butt joint and screw down. That's because the left end needs to align perfectly with the tatami border strip. There's no room for error. It's just a 1 meter shiki, but if I don't set it carefully, it won't line up right. Next, I frame the floor. Just like the floor in the new addition, I installed the ledger boards and run the 1 meter long joists. Since the insulation is also 1 meter, the joists catch the insulation on both sides firmly, preventing it from falling through. On top of that, I'll be laying 12 mm plywood as the subfloor underneath the flooring. For the floor frame, I run the 1 meter long joists, just like in the addition. Basically, I run them in the shorter direction. That way, the insulation fits snugly between the joists, exactly as it should. On top of that, I lay the plywood panels as the subfloor under the flooring. Now that the subfloor is done, it's a lot easier to walk between this room and the addition.
ここだけもう化粧になるっちゅうわけやな。
化粧の柱が4本立つみたいな感じの。
仕上がりは4本立ってるように見えるやろな。
Next, I move on to the kamoi and shiki on the front of the addition. In the addition, there's a household altar section in the middle and oshiire on either side, so it's laid out as 3 bays. There are 2 clean exposed columns only in the middle, and on both sides I'll set exposed half columns. Once everything's finished, it'll look just like there's a full column there, so there's really no need to add a full column at all.
もうあと15上がればいいや。
When setting half columns in afterward like this, you do the prep work ahead of time, cutting the dados for the kamoi, crown moldings, and shiki. It's a lot easier to do that work on the workbench than to cut each groove one by one once they're standing. Anything you can do in a more comfortable position is better. Setting these 45mm half columns also makes the finishing on the walls on both sides look better. The wall stopper sits slightly proud of the wall cleanly, and you can drive in as many screws as you want from the hidden side. Then, when I set the kamoy in the middle, I'll run a string line and use that to set the height. The household altar section comes in the middle with oshi-ire on both sides. Normally, all the kamoy in a Japanese-style room run at the same height, so all three line up straight across. But since this is a simple Japanese-style room with tatami and exposed columns in front, I add a little variation by raising the middle household altar bay. When you hear raise, you might be thinking of a tokonoma, but here the altar will have steps in the middle, so I also slightly raise the kamoy above it. I think it keeps the balance and looks better. Next, I install three 1-meter shiki at the bottom. The tatami is 55mm thick, but these shiki are set 55mm plus 15mm higher, about the thickness of a furring strip. The lower cabinet and the oshi-ire on both sides will have hinged doors, so having the shiki at the same height as the tatami just isn't interesting. With or without a carpet, the doors might catch and scrape. Since it's not really a walking path, I just go ahead and raise it 15mm. Lining up all three at that height looks clean. When you're setting the shiki in, dabbing on a little water makes it harder to scratch the wood. Of all the shiki, a 1-meter one is the trickiest to install. The columns scratch easily because you have to step it in hard from above. There's also a method where you slide it in from the open side, but you're basically stepping it in from above. So this time, I cut a dado on both sides of the shiki and drive plugs into all 6 dado spots. Cutting the dados and plugging them holds firmly and looks clean. It can be a bit of a hassle, but I think this gives the cleanest fit. For even finer work, you stop the dado 15mm back from the front face of the column. That way, the dado won't be visible from the front and you get a clean finish. But the tatami covers it anyway, so I don't think that level of detail is necessary here. Next, I installed the window jamb extensions. Since I used hinoki cypress for the columns and half columns out front, I also use it here. This is a bit thicker solid wood. The work is just a butt joint, but if I drive in 3 long screws and the wood is properly dried, it pretty much never creates a gap. Having about 33 millimeters of thickness actually gives it a more settled, solid look. Now the joinery work, shiki, kahmoy, and window jamb extensions are all in. The interior is roughed in. I can move on to the ceiling or lay the floor. Either order would work. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.